Hi everybody, welcome back. So we are all the way up to chapter 8 of this amazing book, How to Be a Hero by Kat Weldon. And I'm all relaxed on my sofa. I've got my nice cup of tea. And I'm going to read you chapter 8. Are you ready? Okay. Whetstone's boots kicked up dust as he trailed along behind Lotta, keeping his eyes peeled for small, easily pocketable Asgardian trinkets. They left the stables far behind them and were following the narrow, twisting lanes deep into the heart of Asgard. Lotta had sent Broken Tooth home, a look of doggy disappointment on his face. Whetstone shook his cloak over his shoulders, nearly dislodging the large, orange-spotted spider that had tucked itself into a fold in the fabric. He ran a few steps to keep up with Lotta. "I told you to stay in the stables," the girl snorted as she marched along, her brown arms swinging stiffly. "I did. I told you to keep out of trouble." "Actually, you didn't." "But no, you have to get mixed up with Loki. Loki of all people, and now we're off on this stupid quest." "Wait a minute," Whetstone argued, catching up with her. "Don't go blaming me. You lot let Loki wander around unsupervised. Even I know he's trouble. He's Odin's blood brother, and he gets us out of as much trouble as he gets us into." "Yeah, right." After a moment, Whetstone added, "So we're not using the horses then?" "No, thanks to you. Skoll took the key that opens the gateway." "So how else are we going to get down? I should have asked Loki about his flying shoes." Lotta snorted. "What's your problem? I thought you wanted me to go back to Midgard." "I do, but handling stolen goods isn't exactly Valkyrie-like. You need to stop being so full of yourself. If I hadn't stolen the cup, then you wouldn't have anything to make a deal with." Lotta spun on her heels. "I cannot believe I am stuck with you. How could I have thought, even for an instant, that you were a hero?" Whetstone felt the heat rise in his face. "Maybe it's because you're not a very good Valkyrie." Lotta's hands curved into fists. "I am not being banished because of you." Whetstone was surprised to see her hands were shaking. "Just get the cup, okay? And then we can pretend none of this ever happened." She clomped off. The buildings were thinning out now. Ahead of them, Whetstone could see a wide expanse of trees. Lotta paused on the edge of the forest and kicked at a clump of grass, sending a butterfly fluttering. Whetstone joined her at the tree line. The forest seemed to be made entirely of fruit trees. He spotted apples, pears, and plums hanging thickly on the branches, each one ripe, juicy, and golden. Whetstone's mouth watered, and his fingers itched to touch one of them. One of those would be perfect to prove that he'd been to Asgard. If he did have to give up the cup, lots of people would like to hear this story instead, and Lightfinger would love a golden apple. He reached out a hand. "Stop right there!" Lotta whacked him on the arm. "Those aren't for you. Gods only." "Temper, temper." Whetstone rubbed his arm. "Where are we anyway?" "This is Idun's orchard." "And we're here because—" Lotta gave a half smile. "Because we're going to climb." "Climb?" "Yes, down that." She stopped in front of the most enormous tree Whetstone had ever seen. So wide, a dozen men couldn't have circled it with linked arms. Its branches disappeared high above into the clouds. The trunk sank into the earth, somehow passing through the ground. Whetstone, that's Yggdrasil, the world tree." Lotta touched the trunk. "Midgard, the human world, where you should be, where the cup is down, and all we have to do is climb." Whetstone stared, wide-eyed. "Climb down the world tree?" Can you even do that? Lotta shrugged. I don't know anyone who's tried, but I don't see why we can't. She grabbed a low branch and swung herself out onto the tree. Come on, lazybones, we've only got one day. Feeling Lotta's eyes burning into him, Whetstone turned reluctantly away from the golden apples. If the apples were out, he would just have to make sure he had a go with the cup before Loki got his hands on it. Whetstone straightened his cloak. The orange spotted spider used its sticky web to attach itself more securely to the rough fabric. With a sigh, he reached for the nearest branch. They had barely made it through the cloud layer, and Whetstone's arms and legs already ached. The enormous size of the tree made it difficult to find footholds and handholds. The branches were as thick as a man's body and widely spaced. Large green leaves waved lazily in the breeze, threatening to send Whetstone tumbling into the abyss below. He rubbed his hands together and flexed his fingers. The damp clouds had made him chilly, and his clothes were beginning to stick to him uncomfortably. Far, far below them was Midgard. It sat wedged between Yggdrasil's trunk and a thick branch. Water cascaded endlessly over the world's edges. It was very beautiful, but it made him feel a bit sick to see the islands and seas spread out like that. He was used to standing on Midgard, not looking at it. They climbed down the great world tree, Whetstone began, pulling his eyes from the faraway world and reaching for a branch nearby. They climbed down the great world tree. It was a sight for anyone to see. I trust they won't slip, so keep a good grip, and I hope you don't need to pee. He sniggered to himself and carefully hooked an arm around the next branch. What are you grinning about? Lotta called from above. Whetstone looked up at her. How can you tell I'm grinning? I just can now. Stop putting me off. Lotta tightened her grip on the smooth bark. This is harder than it looks. Lotta was not having an easy time climbing down Yggdrasil. Her boots were heavy, covered in metal studs and leather straps, perfect for kicking your enemy when they were on the ground. Not so good for climbing down the slippery tree branches. I cannot believe I'm going to Midgard again, twice in one day. You never know, you might get to like it, Whetstone teased. It's not so bad, really. Ha! Wedging himself in the fork of a particularly wide branch, Whetstone paused for a breather. He brushed leaves out of his hair and wiped a hand across his face. Any idea how long this is going to take? No, just keep going. Whetstone shook his aching arms. Thieving wasn't usually so tiring, except for when you were being chased, of course. He sat down on the branch, his legs dangling. After a moment, Lotta sighed and copied him. Listen, I'm sorry for kidnapping you in crud. Lotta took off her helmet and rubbed her forehead where the metal had pinched her. I really did think you were dead. Dead? You were lying unmoving on the floor. It wasn't until we were at the gates of Asgard and you started snoring that I realised. By then it was too late. Lotta raked her fingers through her black curls, which were starting to go frizzy from the damp clouds. I don't snore. I was so shocked. I thought I was going to fall off Thigh-Biter. Lotta giggled, looking much friendlier. I'm sorry, she bit her lip. I needed someone. I was desperate. Thanks. I didn't mean it like that. She spun the helmet around in her hands. You heard what our teacher, Skald, said. Bringing back dead heroes to fill Valhalla is every Valkyrie's ultimate purpose. I don't think she'd be impressed to find out I got a mangy thief instead. Oi! I'm not mangy. Whetstone leaned back on his arms. I still don't understand why you're all obsessed with heroes. Well, how else are we going to keep the frost giants away? Dunno, maybe you could try asking someone who doesn't have cheese for brains? Lotta gave him a shove. Even if you were a hero, which you're not dead. That's kind of important. I'll be dead one day, though, so Maybe you're just early? Lotta looked doubtful. I don't think Scold will buy that. Won't she be looking for you? And those 2 other girls in the stables? Lotta scraped her curls back into place. Hopefully Loki can distract her for a bit. What did he do to those girls? Will they be okay? It looked like a freezing spell. It's so unfair. I wish I could do magic. Can't you? No, only dwarves, giants and elves can do magic. Whetstone glanced sideways at Lotta. So Valkyries aren't magic then? You've got a flying horse. Lotta shook her head. We're not magic ourselves. We can generate magic from performing heroic acts and use that to give ourselves powers like long lives, extra strength, animal transformations. Animal transformations? Lotta rubbed her nose. Traditionally, Valkyries can turn into swans. I saw someone do that back in Asgard. 1 minute there was a girl, the next minute a bird, Whetstone exclaimed. That must have been acrid. She's a class 2 and is always showing off, Lotta huffed. Just because she's got 100% in her animal transformation, she doesn't have to brag about it. Whetstone smirked at Lotta's grumpy expression, and then something caught his eye. Hey, what's that? He gestured at something over Lotta's shoulder. Lotta peered around and then turned back. It's the branch that leads to the elves. Hey, look, you can see the sign. Alphein means elf home. It's a place we do not need to go right now. No, not the sign, that sparkly gold stuff. Whetstone shuffled past her towards the branch. Lotta yanked on the edge of his cloak. Will you just leave it? Whatever it is, it's not for you. Whetstone shrugged her off and dropped down a couple of branches to reach the one with the sign. A short distance along the branch sat the source of light. It was a shimmering golden harp, half covered with a pile of leaves. It was about as long as Whetstone's arm and slightly triangular in shape, with a curved figurehead like those found on ships. It's a harp. Why is there a harp in Yggdrasil? Lotta dropped down next to him with a thud. Maybe one of the elves lost it. They're a bit scatterbrained. Whetstone's fingers itched to touch the harp. Something that would definitely get all the minstrels singing about him. He dropped onto his knees and reached out a hand. I wouldn't if I were you. Whetstone rolled his eyes. Ah, you are a right misery guts. Has anyone ever told you that? Lotta marched past him, the branch bouncing slightly under her feet. She pointed up to the branches over the harp. Look, dummy, it's a trap. Hanging over the harp was a finely woven net, half hidden in the leaves. It's obviously there to catch anyone who tries to touch the harp. Whetstone lowered his arm. Do lots of people use Yggdrasil to get around? Lotta sniffed. No, not really. So why stick a harp out here and why bother with a trap? Dunno, but it's the sort of thing the dwarves make, and they get really touchy if you start fiddling with their stuff. Whetstone nodded. He inched closer to the harp. Ouch! Tears sprang into his eyes. A large, orange-spotted spider had just sunk his fangs into his hand. Whetstone shook his hand, sending the spider tumbling. Lotta watched him with a bit of a smirk on her face. Is that a friend of yours? It's just bit me. I hope it wasn't poisonous. Whetstone sucked the bite mark. It's braver than me. I wouldn't want to bite you. I might catch something. Ha ha, Lotta grinned. Maybe it just doesn't like harp music. Whetstone peered up at her. Do they teach you jokes as part of your Valkyrie training? Because if they do, you're definitely going to fail. Lotta stuck her tongue out. Whetstone slid onto his stomach. There's something carved into the frame. He paused, peering at Lotta over his shoulder. If the net falls, are you going to pull me out? Lotta snorted and crossed her arms. I'm the only one who knows where the cup is, he reminded her. He tossed her head. Lotta tossed her head. Fine, although I don't see why you can't leave it alone. It's clearly enchanted. It might make you turn into a monster, or make you fall asleep for 100 years, or you might start speaking backwards or something. It must be important, otherwise why set up a trap? Whetstone grinned. Anyway, I'm not going to take it. I just want to see what it says. Yeah, right.